We're just waiting for people to join in, and we'll be getting started soon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Christina DeRocher, and I'm the director of the Museum of Art at the University of New Hampshire, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us for this presentation, Emergent Paradigms in Higher Education in the Times of Disruption. I'd like to thank the Kress Foundation for their generous support. And the idea behind today's presentation is really for us to understand the current landscape and what might be coming down the road for our parent institutions. I think that if we can understand and anticipate what those challenges are and adapt to them, then the stronger we will be and will be positioned for the future. So joining me today is Dr. Natalie Marsh, who's an independent curator and secretary of AAMG. Leading our presentation is Audrey Williams June, news data manager at the Chronicle of Higher Education. She explores and analyzes data sets, databases, and records to uncover higher education trends, insights, and stories. She's built several areas of expertise since arriving at the Chronicle in 2001, including the academic job market, faculty pay, and efforts to diversify the faculty. Audrey is going to be presenting us with charts and diagrams and lots of data that we can use when we're speaking with our provosts and administrators. Following Audrey's presentation, we'll be hearing from Dr. Steven Mintz, professor of history at the University of Texas, Austin. Dr. Mintz is a pioneer in the application of new technologies to teaching and research and is an award-winning teacher and author. He previously served as the senior advisor to the president of Hunter College for student success, spearheaded educational innovation initiatives for the University of Texas system, and directed Columbia University's Teaching Center. So I'd like to welcome everyone today, Audrey and Steven. Each of our presenters will share their information, and you can put questions into the chat. Following their presentations, we will read your questions and we'll have a conversation afterwards. So Audrey, why don't we get started with you? You're going to share some information with us, and I can't wait to dig into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone, and I hope you're having a great day so far today. I'm really excited about being able to give you a data-driven, big picture view of the higher education landscape as this pandemic rages on. But I'd first like to thank AAMG for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Okay. So I like to get started with what people have been making predictions about since last spring, and that's been enrollment. The National Student Clearinghouse Research Center has been collecting data on enrollment monthly since just before the pandemic began. And the reason they're doing it at such frequency is that so people can have a sort of real-time view of what's happening with enrollment in this time of great disruption to higher ed. And so the takeaway here, obviously, is that undergraduate enrollment is down, and it's down 4.4%. And this is from the same time last year. You can see each of the sectors here in the chart as well. So this data was released last week, and this 4.4% number is one that's been inching itself up since the summer. Their first data release was in the summer, reflected the summer months, and undergraduate enrollment was down 2.5%, and it's just been inching up since then to the number that you see here today. With community colleges suffering the way that they have here, this almost 10% decline, I'm already wondering what that's going to mean for four-year colleges who rely on community college transfer students to contribute to their enrollment numbers. Those colleges are going to feel that impact probably sooner rather than later. And so that's something that the administrators at your institutions are surely paying attention to. And if there's any good news about undergraduate enrollment, which, I mean, you can take this the way you will, it's that it's not as bad as people thought it would be. I remember in the early days of reporting and writing about the pandemic that people had predictions of 20% as much as high as 20%. And so clearly we're not there for undergraduate enrollment, graduate enrollment the same, it's actually up. But for individual institutions, this 4.4 number is low, like they have actually been able to see keep enrollment the same or actually see it increase. And then obviously there are institutions who this 4.4% number would be a great one for them because they are actually, their enrollment has plummeted much more than what you see here. Here's another thing that I think we should really pay attention to, and that's international students. There's a lot going on here, but I want you to focus on the international student, what's happening with that. In undergraduate enrollment and among graduate students, international students are down. And what's interesting, particularly about the graduate student enrollment being down, is that in graduate students, every single group grew except for international students. And international students, as you know, typically pay out-of-state tuition and they cover the full cost of their education. So they're a critical revenue source for colleges. And because of this, early on in the pandemic, people were really concerned about, are international students actually going to be able to show up this fall? Their ability to come to the US was at risk, very much at risk. And so you can see the decline here. And this is a tough financial loss for colleges. Like some colleges literally cannot afford for this enrollment pattern to continue. Also for the broader American economy, which includes towns, not just, college towns, not just campus, this is a tough loss for them. According to new research from NASFA, the Association of International Educators, for the first time in 2 decades, the amount of money that international students have contributed to the broader American economy has gone down 4%. It was 41 billion and now it is 38 billion. So that's a big number. And again, it's a concern that ripples beyond the colleges themselves. Here wrong slide. Here the focus obviously is freshman students. And this year you can see that their enrollment is down 13% from the same time last year. And again, this is NSE data that was released last week. And so of course the drop at community colleges contributed to that. You can see the 18.9%, which is where a good bit of students get their start, contributed to that decline. One last thing about enrollment, one clear trend has been how students from underrepresented minority groups are not showing up. And here, this is a focus on freshmen, but that pattern is the same, very similar for undergraduates across the board. This kind of decline in Black, Hispanic, and Native American students shows that many of the students in the racial or ethnic groups most affected by the pandemic are also losing their access to higher education, even at the community college level, as you saw before. And one interesting fact about Hispanic students is that their freshman numbers were actually up 1.3% in the fall of 2019, and they were the only racial and ethnic group among freshmen whose numbers increased last year. So what you're seeing now with the enrollment decline in Hispanic students is a twist in their higher ed trajectory. So moving on to revenue, this is another thing that lots of people in higher education are obviously paying attention to. When students don't enroll, when they don't live on campus, when they don't need room and board, when special events are virtual or they're canceled, obviously revenue falls, and you can see what some college presidents said happened to their revenue streams here in various areas this fall. Take note of how many of these revenue streams revolve around people actually being on campus or being able to visit campus. And you can see that the decreases are largest there. So again, with the special programs, 93% said there was a decrease in their revenue there. So that's obviously some real evidence of how important being on campus and people being able to visit campus, how important that is to the revenue streams for colleges. This is clearly a time where colleges are 100% looking at even more ways to diversify their revenue streams, because some of these things for the foreseeable future are going to be down in the ways that you see here. I want to go a little deeper on revenue because there's a certain type of revenue that colleges are laser focused on right now, and that's net tuition revenue. And really at the end of the day, net tuition revenue matters more even than enrollment. And so as you all probably know, net tuition revenue is the money that colleges use to operate. So it's how many tuition dollars come in minus the money that colleges pay out in financial aid. So you might think, well, if you want more tuition dollars to come in, you can just raise tuition. But what can happen there is that when you do that, students can't afford to come. And so the college, who obviously needs students to show up, they end up getting out more financial aid. And then that eats up the money that they were hoping to make by raising tuition. So the struggle for colleges right now is that, it's not a good look to charge more tuition when some families are obviously hanging on, by a thread financially. And so colleges are really fighting not to raise the tuition, but at the same time, they're likely to be paying out more in financial aid to students to help with tuition that they didn't raise, remember, because again, some families are barely hanging on financially. And so the wrinkle in this is that colleges probably aren't going to be able to increase tuition or cut back on financial aid for the foreseeable future, just because the effects of the pandemic are going to be rippling out a few years. It's likely to continue. And so this trend of declining net tuition revenue is also likely to continue. And as this slide notes, private colleges are the sector of higher ed that are really under the microscope here, because the tuition discount rates that you see here, more than 60% for 30% of some of these private colleges. It's that kind of tuition discounting just is not sustainable. One thing I will say about tuition increases this year, though, is that according to the College Board, although average tuition and fees did increase this year, they're the lowest seen since the 1990-91 academic year. Average tuition and fees increased by 1.1% for in-state students at public colleges, public four-year institutions, 1.9% for students who were in district at their community college, and then 2.1% for students at private four-year colleges. So again, it's an increase, but it's the lowest increase in several decades. And so I guess that's a positive note that kind of really shows you that institutions are trying to hold the line on tuition costs for students and their families. So when colleges can increase revenue, they turn to cutting expenses, as you might guess. And this happened obviously in 2008 in the Great Recession, and we're seeing it again now. And a common way to cut expenses is by cutting jobs. And so this data is from a survey the Chronicle did of enrollment managers, where they were asked what cuts did their institution expect to make this fall. And as you can see, part-time staff was the response for the largest share of colleges. And there are also institutions that have announced wholesale cuts to programs. And so although you don't see tenured professors reflected in this data, when programs are cut like that, obviously there can be instances where the tenured professors that are attached to those programs will also lose their jobs. So the pandemic definitely has taken a toll on the academic workforce. This is more of an overview of what's happening to the workforce in public and private colleges across the nation, and at a level that includes anybody who's employed by a college. So this is, every level, support staff and professional staff. This is from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. So they are really looking at every single job under a certain industry. And the striking thing here is the pre-pandemic number that you can see here at March 20 is 46 million higher education workers. And then at the end of the line, you see it's dropped to 41.8 million. So there's really no other way to put that, right? That's a lot of jobs, hundreds of thousands, as the headline says. And also what's not shown here, but still is a very real thing in higher education, is the numbers of people who are not going to get a chance to enter the higher education workforce. And what I mean by that is the hiring freezes in higher ed are real. I'm sure that some of you know about that. And so that's another thing that is going to have a long-term impact on the higher ed workforce, because there just are going to be jobs that are not going to be filled. People are just not going to have the opportunity to gain employment in higher ed. Because I covered the academic workplace for so long, I think a lot about people in graduate school who want to be professors. And I spent a lot of time in 2008 writing about that and how people were applying for jobs and, they just would be frozen or just even eliminated in the middle of the search because people, couldn't follow through on them. And so again, that's a different way that higher ed workers are just, they're not going to be a part of the workplace going forward. Here I've taken the top 10 of 19 issues that the American Council on Education asked a few hundred presidents to weigh in on, as far as whether or not these issues were pressing to them. And the presidents were allowed to pick 5. And so obviously you can see that presidents are concerned about finances and spring enrollment numbers, et cetera. But I like one thing that this data captures, and it's that student mental health and faculty and staff mental health is right, up there in the mix. One of them is leading, at the top 5. And so in 2020, the year that, feels like a decade, it's weighing on people in higher education, and that's not escaping the notice of top administrators. Some of the other things that are here, you would expect, a lot of it has to do with just, the operations of figuring out the safety protocols and what are we going to do in the spring and that kind of thing. But again, the student mental health and faculty and staff mental health is very high up. And so I thought that was important to include because it shows that, these are issues that have made their way to the top. Zooming in on mental health for students, this is from very early on in the pandemic, as you can see, but it shows that more students were depressed in the March-May period of this year as compared to fall of 2019. And this survey also looks at their academic performance and how, just trying to struggle through the mental health issues that they have really affected students' academic performance. And so you can see the different behaviors, some of which ramped up because of the pandemic. And even though there wasn't a good data set for updated, how does the fall compare to the spring? But I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying that I'm pretty sure that things probably have not changed for students. They're, navigating a lot of things that they weren't navigating before, and it doesn't seem to be letting up anytime soon. So I chose a single stat here to show this is really kind of representative of the lack of work-life balance that professors say they have right now. 70% of them are very or extremely stressed. They anticipate feeling very or extremely stressed through the rest of 2020. This is from a survey that the Chronicle did with Fidelity. And it just really speaks to what people are grappling with right now. I don't have data on professional staff and other employees at colleges and universities, but again, there's plenty of anecdotal evidence that stress levels are high across the enterprise. So with the mental health of students and increasing, I get in the mental health of faculty and staff under so much scrutiny now, I really get an increasing sense that colleges have begun to realize that they're going to have to support these groups in ways that they have not in the past, so that they're able to do the work that they need to do, but also take care of their families and take care of their mental health. Some other interesting tidbits from this survey showed that tenure track professors are feeling a really undue amount of stress, and a lot of their stress was tied into being able to meet all the requirements that they need to meet in order to get tenure. I found this interesting because I know that many institutions have said that they have altered or relaxed or whatever, made the requirements so that tenure track professors don't have to feel this pressure, but they still do, obviously. And they're kind of really scrambling on how to make everything work. And for tenured professors, a lot of their conversation in the open-ended questions that we had with this survey was about how they can't find time to do research, and they just really miss being able to do research the way that they once did. And they also were not as happy as they thought they would be about the quality of the teaching that they're able to do in the pandemic. An interesting sidebar to that was that I then began to wonder what effects this is going to have on research long-term, where people they they don't feel connected to it because they just have so many things on the table. They don't feel connected to the research. They can't figure out how to do it, et cetera. So I think that's something that I'm sure at the Chronicle we'll be exploring going down the line on what this means for the research enterprise post-pandemic. The last thing I'd like to share about how the pandemic has affected people in higher ed as they made these various adjustments in the pandemic has to do with the digital divide. So there's always been talk in higher ed about the digital divide and how it affects students. But it was really laid bare by the quick pivot that institutions had to do in March. And you can see here what that lack of access looks like. 4 out of 10 students had to go and buy some big ticket items to do their classwork. And you can see computers and headphones and printers and all those things that you think students might have. In reality, some of them don't. And they had to go out to buy these things in order to do their work. And some of the follow-up data to this particular survey shows that 70% of students said they were the ones footing the bill for this. And more than 2/3 of them considered the cost of the things they had to buy to be very significant. So even though many colleges did what they could by providing hotspots and loaning out laptops, or some people started brand new programs for that particular purpose, the fact of the matter is that it was a really tough time for some people. And having to learn in a remote environment for students is challenging, obviously. And there's no doubt that some students are just calling it quits on college, or they're not starting at all. And some of that's probably reflected in the enrollment numbers that we saw earlier. Let's see. This last section of my presentation focuses on just a few different ways that colleges might look to reach out to potential students post-pandemic, or even sooner if that's possible. And Steve, of course, is going to talk more in detail about the path forward, but I wanted to just raise a few issues. I wanted you to see what 95,000 freshmen who began college at a 4-year institution in the fall of 2019 said was important for them in deciding to go to college. So yes, they want to get a job. That's clearly here, and high percentages are thinking about that. But what that says to me is there definitely seems to be some opportunity for some colleges to ramp up experiential learning. One way to get a better job is to get some of that, experience out. What are some of these jobs like, and what are some of the things that you have to do on the job? So that's one thing. And I have these rows shaded here because that suggests to me that students are also open to what basically amounts to learning new things, learning about things that interest them and becoming more aware of the world around them. And so to me, this kind of exposure is right in your wheelhouse. Academic museums and galleries seem particularly well suited for this. And for many of you, it probably comes down to deepening what you're already doing with students, what you're already doing with faculty as they look to help students, and maybe also making some new connections so that you can sharpen your efforts post-pandemic in this area. This slide reflects a trend that's been, this slide shows a little bit more about experiential learning programs. And what I thought was interesting here is that there's half of these programs are established and stable, but there are nearly 40% of them that are, somewhere in between. Like, we didn't just start and we're not established and stable, but we're somewhere in between. And so again, this suggests to me that there's some room to kind of expand this, to give students some of what they, even though they might not be asking for this overtly, although in some instances they are, this is very much linked to their desire to get a better job, to get a good job, to have careers where they feel like they can financially support themselves. And this allows them to explore those programs, explore those particular fields and learn more about them. So. This is a slide about traditional degrees and how they're losing, I guess I should say, some of their shine, and not their shine in particular all the way. And I included this because it really, you're looking at more and more people wanting to get some level of education, but not always a bachelor's degree, not always an associate's degree or a graduate degree, but maybe they're wanting to look at a way to learn something specific for the job that they have, and they can advance if they learn it, or learn something that allows them to transition to a different career. And this was a survey that was done in the last, like August, and they asked them in the next 6 months if you were going to seek an educational opportunity, what would it be? And so you can see how prevalent non-degree credentials and skills training is here. And I think that there are colleges that are looking, not just community colleges as well, that are looking at what are some certificates that we can give to students, what are some ways that we can kind of enter this field of certificate and non-degree credentials. And the pandemic, again, is showing that this is the kind of education that people may have on their minds going forward as they try to kind of navigate what their own futures are going to look like once things get back to normal. Seems so odd to say, but normal. I think I skipped a slide somewhere that I wanted to make sure I hit. All right, I don't see that for some reason, but I did want to talk about the community college transfer rate. And that's an enrollment piece that I think is very key to mention. And what I like to say about that is that one of the things that panned out, that one of the predictions that did not pan out, was that students at four-year colleges were going to leave behind their four-year colleges, at least for this particular year, and go to community colleges. And that ended up not happening in ways that community colleges now know, because their enrollment, again, is down a great deal. But what did occur is two-year students moved to four-year colleges. 50% of the transfers that happened this particular in the fall of 2020 were that, and that's up 2.6%. And so moving forward, because the community college students did not show up in the numbers that they have in previous years, again, this speaks to colleges who rely on community college transfers, that going forward, that you may not see those transfers happen in the way that we have in the past. And again, you've got kind of the precursor, maybe the last gasp of that this particular fall, because again, that there was growth there. There was not growth in 4 to 2. It went down 18.9%. So that, again, as you're looking at new student bodies and new pools of students to go to, I think colleges would be well served to kind of to be mindful of what didn't happen in community colleges, again, could affect you down the line. There is one more thing I wanted to mention, and that would be about 36 million people who have some college but no degree. And so that's a huge number, and that seems overwhelming. But if you drill down into that 36 million number, there are 3.5 million people who have what basically amounts to 2 years of college credit. And when you look at that group of people, what that allows you to do is say, okay, here's a pool of potential students that if we do a little bit of outreach work and work with them to get them across the proverbial finish line, if you will, that might be a pool of potential students for us. And more people are probably going to end up in this group of people who have some college and no degree, again, because there are some people who did not enroll in college this year, who had started but didn't enroll this year, and then the jury's out on whether or not they'll finish. But again, that finish line that you may be able to get them to may mean something different depending on the purpose, on the person. And so again, it might be a bachelor's degree, but it also might be some kind of non-degree credential or some skills training. And I think more and more colleges will probably be open to that and trying to figure out, what is that? How can we reach that particular student? Also reaching out to this 3.5 million group could help move the needle on educational attainment for underrepresented minorities, because 38% of the people in this group were Black and Hispanic at the time that the data was analyzed. And the last time I seen that data was 2019. So again, as we talk about equity in higher ed, that's one way, is to reach out to these non-traditional students, many of whom are older, and also they are from underrepresented minority groups, and reaching out to them could, again, really move the needle on educational attainment. Um, so that pretty much does it for me. I, again, am very glad to be able to share those insights with you. I had many, many more. In fact, I think one slide that I tried to squeeze in here didn't actually make it, but I went ahead and gave the information as well. There's lots of data out there about these challenges that colleges are facing. So I kind of gave you an overview. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Audrey. We're going to dig into some of that data after Steven speaks. And again, if people have questions, please put them in the chat. Thanks so much, Audrey. Steven?
My pleasure. There's a 1945 Hollywood movie with a very haunting title. They Were Expendable. And having been in the upper reaches of administration at various institutions, I know that what senior administrators are thinking about right now is what is expendable. They face severe enrollment pressures, as Audrey has pointed out. They face financial pressures, and something has to give. They either have to find new sources of revenue or they have to make cuts. And what I want to talk about now are ways to prevent the museums from being part of those cuts. I believe that what you do is absolutely essential and will be even more important post-pandemic. But in this period, when administrators are pulling out their hair, trying to find ways to cut back, it is crucial that you be clear about the value that you add to your institution. Right now, as we all know, we're in the midst of 3 crises simultaneously: a health crisis, an employment crisis, and a long overdue reckoning with race. And one of the challenges you all face, I know, is how to show that you can contribute to a more sustainable, resilient, and successful institution. And failure to do that could be catastrophic. Okay? We all know, as Audrey has pointed out, that revenue is down, financial aid expenditures are up, the costs of adapting to the pandemic are huge, and institutions face a kind of nightmare. Even if the overall enrollment trends don't look catastrophic, the loss of revenue that they're facing is catastrophic. And so the question is what to do about this. State aid is sure to fall. Philanthropic donations are going to decline in the face of competing demands. And ancillary revenue has fallen through the floor, and even contract research has declined. And what makes this all worse is that the real appeal of our institutions, the campus experience, the college experience, concerts, parties, athletic events, informal socializing, and above all, clubs and organizations, these too are all at risk. And so if there has ever been a time when we need to be creative, if there's ever been a time when we need to be imaginative, when we need to be bold, this is it. And the principles that we need to embrace, I think, are pretty obvious: equity, inclusion, and a student focus. And your museums can play a crucial role in helping to attain all of those goals. There are 4 basic challenges that institutions face and that you need to make sure your institutions are aligned with. Issue number one is student satisfaction. Students are not happy right now. They are wondering about the tuition that they're paying and what they're getting in return for that tuition. The experience that they're going through is not what they dreamed of. The quality is at best mixed and in too many cases poor. So what can we do to improve levels of student satisfaction? Second, all parents and most students are thinking an awful lot these days about what business people call ROI. ROI, return on investment. A college education is very expensive. It's among the largest expenditures that any family will ever make. And so what is going to be the return? Is it worth it, especially at the more expensive institutions, or is it a sort of waste of money, especially in these times? The third challenge involves career preparedness and preparing young people to be adults. You saw Audrey's figures, and so many of the priorities of students, but particularly of their parents, are to ensure that a college education will pay off in the future, that it will result in a stable, successful, thriving career. And as all of us also know, it's taking longer to grow up. The 20s have replaced the teenage years as times of uncertainty, when many young people flail and flounder for years before falling into a job that may or may not reflect their real interests. I just heard Raj Chetty, the Harvard economist, say today that a person's future is determined at the age of 23, and that he can predict their long-term prospects depending on where they are as soon as they graduate from college. We have to do a much better job with career preparation. And fourth, we need to demonstrate, especially to legislators, that we are deeply committed to our communities. They have many priorities for spending: K-12 schools, mental health, transportation, criminal justice, and on and on. We, higher ed, is at the bottom of the list, but we can't fall off that list. So here are my recommendations to you. Here are practical steps that I think you can take that will make a real difference about your museum's future. Step one, make your programs indispensable. Work hand in glove with departments and individual faculty members to integrate your museum into the student experience. Tell professors that you're happy to give a virtual tour or to explicate and interpret an object or to communicate offline with students. You need to be indispensable. You need to help the institution engage students. One of the most thrilling educational opportunities I was ever involved in was working with the Museum of Fine Arts Houston and its director, Peter Marzio, who allowed us to have students, both graduate students and undergraduates, create the educational websites for every exhibit. Could they have done better by hiring a New York design firm? Absolutely. But was this the richest, most fulfilling experience for these students? We talk about authentic learning. We talk about real world experience. These students designed websites. They uploaded materials. They wrote labels. And they spoke offline to students all around Houston. What an experience this was for them. And it meant that they had a resume with something real on it, a demonstrated skill. And for their parents, they could show them the website that they contributed to. This is the kind of tangible project that you can bring to life on your campus. Step 2, reach out. This is not the time to stay alone. Reach out to faculty, reach out to students, reach out to alumni, reach out to every stakeholder that you can possibly think of. Partner with the media relations and development offices of your campus. Conduct virtual tours. Offer lectures. Create salons. Offer workshops. Spotlight individuals or works. Stream something from your museum. Start a blog. Become a go-to place for information. Becoming indispensable is not a mission impossible. That doesn't mean it's easy, especially in these days when you're no doubt losing staff support. But this is a chance to engage students who are very interested in the arts or in history or natural history or science, and engage them, put them to work. They're looking for something meaningful. They're looking for something fulfilling. They want to build skills. They do not want this to be a big wasted semester. Give them a chance to contribute. Give them a chance to do something real and powerful. Step 3, see how you can contribute to career readiness. Offer skills workshops. Offer virtual internships. Offer apprenticeships. Connect with off-campus partners, with artists, with curators, with artists and musicians and others, with historians for that matter, and try to showcase them. You have a chance to be the most dynamic, the most vital, vibrant part of your campus when others are depressed. That's just the moment we need to step up. It's just the moment when we have to show our value. One thing that we're seeing at institutions right now, and we're going to see a lot more in the future, is a blurring of the academic and the co-curricular. If we want students to be satisfied with their experience at our institutions, it's the co-curricular activities that are the most memorable and the most meaningful. You are positioned despite all the stress and despite all the financial challenges, you are positioned to offer things that no one else can or will offer. You have real resources to share. You have a chance to do so much to enrich students' lives, to broaden their skills base, to connect them to the real world. In Texas, we say that there are only 3 ways to respond. You can play offense, you can play defense, or you can stand on the sidelines. And right now, standing on the sidelines is not much of an option. Playing defense makes no sense. Take the offense. Show how valuable you are and your institution is, and make it clear that you have stepped up to the plate at this moment when we really need people to stand forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steven. Very inspiring, and I appreciate the steps that you put forward and are charging us with. We have a question already in the chat for Audrey. So Audrey, I don't know if you want to come back on, unmute yourself, and we can see you with video. Hey.
Hey, okay. Oh, yes. Can I screen share to answer this? Because I have a favorite graphic that.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So I'll read the question while
Okay.
you're getting set up. So
Okay.
is there any thought to demographics, that is the number of 18-year-olds coming up? I have heard that there will be a drop-off in the population of 18-year-olds at some point in the future, but I am not sure of that. Can you talk about whether this is an issue for university and colleges or not?
Okay. All right, so here is a map that I like to use to help answer this question. This is from a professor at Carleton College, Nathan Graw. And so the short version of this is everything that is red, orange, the different orange, like if it's not blue, if it's not the 2 blues, that's where there's decline in college going students. And the age that you're asking about, 18. So they're looking at 18 to 24. And so they're huge parts of the country, right? That there's no growth in that age group. This is something that colleges are paying attention to, absolutely. And as you can see here, the amount of years that they've given, 2012 to 2029, I've seen that even as early as 2025, where that drop off is supposed to happen. And so if that's the case, then that is really something to be paying attention to, because at that point, you'll probably be free and clear, right, of the pandemic. But you're running right into this other thing, which we're looking at now. So I'm not sure exactly, how colleges can really get ready for this, because it is happening, and these are kind of the years where you would be trying to address that and do things about it. And we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. So as Steve said, there's lots of things that are going to have to happen, because the cliff is coming.
So Audrey, maybe you could sort of digging into that just a little bit, thinking about that pool of non-traditional students, or the students that may have completed 2 years degree, looking to finish more. Any information on colleges and universities and what they're doing to attract those people, and maybe how academic museums, Steven, to bring you into this conversation, how academic museums might be positioned to help their parent institutions pull those people into our classrooms?
I would say that part of what the National Student Clearinghouse was saying at the time that they released that data was that colleges actually aren't doing enough. to reach that population. And so that was one of the reasons for them pulling out that particular piece of that whole 36 million people group is pulling one of their reasons for pulling that out was saying, hey, over here, there's people here that you can actually reach. I think what it will take, and Steven has spoken to this, is just outreach at some levels that we probably haven't seen to date. And again, this is outreach in the form of what does the path look like for each particular person, right? To bring them in, and having the types of programs that address what it is that they are looking to do educationally. And again, this echoes what Steven said, that people want skills training, and they want various certificates and hands-on type of things. So there's definitely room here. And I just think the conversation now is going to be, okay, what does the effort look like?
Mm-hmm.
If higher ed is going to thrive in the future, it is going to have to find new audiences. And we've talked about several of those audiences. Community college transfer students are going to be absolutely essential. Working adults are going to be absolutely essential. Stop out students who dropped out, but who could potentially be brought back in. And I learned a lesson in developing programs. Those students do not want a general studies degree. They want a degree that will translate into a career, into a job. And therefore, it is really, really important to focus on skills and to help them develop a portfolio. The future of education is not lectures. We tried that with MOOCs. The future of learning is project-based. And you and your institutions are really well positioned to bring students into projects and to help them create a real portfolio of interesting projects that they contributed to. And think of all the wonderful community-focused projects that you could work on right at this moment. A handful of institutions, for example, have studied their legacy of slavery and race. If your campus hasn't done it, what a great moment to do that. And you'll almost certainly be able to get money from the central administration, even in these hard-pressed times, if you will put students to work looking at the legacy of race on the campus. It's not going to be a pleasant topic in most cases. And yet we've got to do this reckoning, and nobody is better positioned, I think, than you to do that. Let me give you another example of something that you could do just based on my own experience. I worked on a project with the New York Historical Society on slavery in New York. And we had many focus groups about this. How do you handle a really unsettling, deeply disturbing topic? Will you bring in a lot of people to talk about it and you tap their wisdom? But what we learned from that is, first of all, it needed to be personal, needed to focus as much as possible on real individuals, not on abstractions. But more than that, it needed to focus on the present and its relationship to the past. And so we involved contemporary artists to reflect upon slavery. Think if you could think of ways in your own museum to use contemporary reflections on exhibits and how that might fit into the story. It's a way of involving a much larger audience. It's a way of connecting to students and to the community. And it will really enrich what you're doing.
Thank you, Steven. We have a couple more questions that are coming to us from the Q&A. The first is from an anonymous attendee asking, I'm assuming this is to Audrey, but I think both of you could probably provide us some response. Does your data consider online education degree programs and the future of hybrid education? So where is online education going? It was already, burgeoning and it kind of exploding prior to the pandemic, and now everybody's doing it. And what really is the future? What should we think our institutions will look like in 2 or 3 years?
I actually do not have data on online degree programs, but one thing that I can say about this, and this is just from many years of being at the Chronicle, it's going on 20 years next year, is that this time more than any other has shown that colleges really see now the infrastructure that they need, the work they have to put behind, et cetera, to make online educational be a thing that engages students and really, it really has to work. And so in March, lots of people got, a free pass for all intents and purposes, because you're just kind of stumbling your way to the gate. But the door is open. I'm mixing all kind of metaphors. The gate, the gate is open. And in some ways, that piece of higher ed is not going back. And so what I would say about that is that I think it's going to be very interesting going forward to see who the players are that kind of run with it, pull forward, the people who have already been doing that and who were best positioned to navigate what's happening now, what happens for them going forward. Are they ramping up even more? Do they have competition that they did not once have? I'm really interested in looking at those trends and what the data says about that, or will say about that.
Students love the flexibility and convenience of online, and they hate the quality. Yeah. I have 1,500 students right now, and I can assure you that most of them would rate the online courses that they're taking as anywhere from mediocre to poor. Now, it is possible to create really rich online experiences. And if institutions are willing to invest the time and money, they can do it right. Otherwise, they're going to lose all their students to places that are spending the money, places like Western Governors or Southern New Hampshire or Arizona State. Now, what does it take to create really high quality experiences? It takes instructional designers, it takes educational technologists, it takes assessment specialists, but it also takes experts in media who are you, who know how to incorporate artworks or historical objects into presentations. The next level, the next iteration of higher ed is what I'll call interactive courseware. These are the next version of textbooks, but they're highly interactive. They include lots of simulations. They're very engaging. They have rich multimedia. They have animations and video, and they emphasize inquiry and active learning. These are just the backbone of a course. There'll be an in-person part 2, but these need to be developed. And you could play a role in that because you know better than anyone about how to get people to interact with visual materials, how to write succinctly. And when you produce a label, you're doing exactly what we need to be doing in these rich online experiences. You can do this. And if institutions continue to teach Zoom University, they're going to lose their students. No one is going to pay $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for Zoom University. It has to be something richer than that. And you can play a role in helping raise people's vision of what's possible.
Thank you, Steven.
Thank you. So I just want to change topics here just a little bit. One of the ideas that we had all talked about when we had met offline was this idea of portability, of transferability, that people may be, you called it, what is it, not drop out, stop out? Stop out. But also, so there's that, but then there's also accelerated programs for students who want to cruise through. So Audrey, I don't know if you have information, or Steven, you have any insights into our students who might be adept at these hybrid models, thinking of going to school year round. Is the academic calendar going to be blown up to be able to accommodate people who want to accelerate, or to just allow for rolling admissions? What are you seeing on the horizon?
Audrey, do you want to go first?
You're muted, Audrey. I got to take you off mute.
I'll defer to you on that. Let me at least let you get started.
Okay. You know, there has been a lot of talk over the years that the single easiest way to cut the cost of higher education is make it 3 years instead of 4. And no one really knew how to do that. Now we do. Students are taking early college dual degree programs. They're doing AP in their senior year of high school, and they're coming into the university with 15 or 20 or even 30 hours credit. And innovative institutions are now offering not only summer classes, often at very cut rate prices, but they're offering what we call vacation courses or intersession courses, when you can pick up 3 hours here and 3 hours there. And it makes an undergraduate education not only go quicker, but it makes it less painful. That is, you could take 12 hours during the fall and then pick up the other 3 hours in January, and take 12 hours in the spring and then take 3 hours in the summer. Again, I think that you want to see if there's a place for you in this new model that we're moving towards. Now, the pressure for this is not coming from senior administrators on campus. In the states where it's really important, it's coming from legislators. It's coming from state coordinating boards. They are much more responsive to parents' fears of cost than those of us on campus tend to be. But it's coming. In some states like Florida and Texas, it's really advanced. And it's going to happen everywhere because more and more students want to get their college education over and get moving on ahead with life.
So maybe there's an opportunity for us to think of, instead of reaching out, we're kind of reaching down into those accelerated programs that might be taking place off campus or during summers and intersessions. And imagine a humanities class that you could do, masterworks of art, or a broader based humanities class that focused on museums, museum skills, interpretation, working with art. Those are the kind of courses I am convinced that students will find way more engaging than my 1,500 person intro to US history. We want them to have experiences that they're going to remember long after they've graduated. And I think, with some creativity, we can do that. The largest growth area on our campuses is not deans, it's skilled, quote unquote, non-teaching professionals, most of which have MFAs or master's degrees, and usually a PhD. They are completely capable of teaching courses and should be teaching courses, and could be a really valuable resource in allowing campuses to expand their offerings at a time of real austerity. Natalie, you're muted.
We have another question, thank you, from J. Hope Amison. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. She asks, given previous years of economic crisis, namely 2008, but also 2001, many colleges and universities retreated from their commitments to academic museums and galleries. Thus, many of us are operating with fewer resources, almost no staff, and a meager budget, though many of us still manage to take excellent care of objects. Do you have any advice for these museums on how we can leverage our very few resources? For example, only one staff member, for the best offense, to use a word you used a moment ago, that might be possible.
Work study is part of the answer, right? Thinking in terms of students as art ambassadors, that's part of the answer. Using students who have skills in instructional design is part of the answer. What you can, I think, communicate to leadership is that a lot of student work can take place on campus and should take place on campus. Students want to develop skills. We're offering a venue where they can learn those skills. You have, every campus has students who are so committed to museums, to art, historical objects, and the like. Take advantage of them. And I don't mean take advantage in the exploit them sense. Institutions are going to have money for work study. See if you can leverage that. And don't just look at the traditional students who love to do this, who have wealthier, affluent parents, and this was always part of the vision. Try to convince a much more diverse student body that it is really a great moment for them to make their voice heard, to help shape exhibitions, to help reinterpret objects, and to be part of this, of the real culture industry, which for too long they were really excluded from.
Thank you.
So I have a question sort of about that student experience. And Audrey, I don't know if this is something that was reflected in the slide that you presented on the drop in staffing. But what are we seeing for graduate students, many of whom who rely on teaching assistantships? They're doing postdoctoral research. What's happening during this time? I know, Audrey, you presented a slide where there was an increase in graduate enrollment, but what are those opportunities for them going to be, or how can we support those students who are really the faculty of tomorrow? And Audrey, you're muted, just so if you want to respond, you'll have to unmute.
That's a good question on what's going to happen with them. And I'm kind of looking now to see what's going to bubble up from that. Much of what we've written in the Chronicle about graduate programs as of late have been people not admitting cohorts for certain disciplines, at some institutions, or I feel like there's at least one place that we've written about that has changed the funding structure in some way, not for the good of the graduate students, less money. So that is a very good question. I'm not sure yet what is happening there. I don't know if Steven has more insight at all, but that's an excellent question, excellent thing to look at.
My current PhD student, who is just wonderful and who got research grants from virtually every archive across the Northeast, is in Austin, right? She can't travel to take advantage of this. For her, it's not going to be a totally lost year, but it's close to a totally lost year in many ways. It's certainly added another year to her progress. And worse yet, the number of jobs that are available this year looks unbelievably pathetic, but who knows if the future is going to bounce back. So For many graduate students, this is a deeply demoralizing moment. And maybe, just maybe, your institution could help them out. They need something on their resume. They need something to feel good about. They need a project that's meaningful right now. And even though it's quote unquote extra work, they've got some spare time, I'm afraid, because they're not able to do some of the things they would normally do. So pairing with some of these graduate students would only be a good thing. Again, it's not exploitation, it's offering invitations and seeing if some people will take you up on this. Again, the graduate student profile, at least in the humanities and arts right now, is incredibly diverse. This is a great moment to bring new voices and new perspectives into your institution. Let's take advantage of that.
Thank you, Steven. We have another question from Lindell King, directed to Steven. Can you reflect on how we can use our collections in the kinds of projects you're talking about, particularly now that we can't actually let students into our galleries and into our storage rooms for the most part? I think your research projects sound great, but would love to hear you reflect on using the collections.
Well, when I was at Hunter College last year, during the worst days of the pandemic in March, we worked with the Frick collection, and the Frick curators would meet individually with classes and go over a single painting for an hour. And the students loved it. It was the only part of the online experience that they actually enjoyed. In another example, we worked with the chief financial officer of the New York Historical Society, who talked about the financial challenges that the institution was facing and how they were trying to handle this. The students really felt like they were eavesdropping, that they were getting, for the first time in their entire academic experience, hearing what the world was really like when you're on the inside. And they shared their own ideas. And those moments, again, were the most powerful of the whole time period, at a time when it looked like New York City, was literally falling to pieces, when all you could hear were sirens and alarms. Something good was happening, and you can do that. Another example is the quote unquote art museum or historical museum at home. Reaching out to alumni is really valuable. Reaching out to the local community and communicating your resources and showing that you care. Reaching out to the local school system and seeing if there's something you can do to contribute. Now, of course, one reason the Frick or the New York Historical Society was happy to work with us is because they needed to report to their donors what they were doing. And you can report too to your president and provost and others about the valuable contribution you're making. Again, I'm not here to tell you to do more work when you're already up to your eyeballs in work, but this is a chance for your institution to rethink your role, to see how absolutely central it is, and how in the future, when the pandemic hopefully is over, that they shouldn't let that go. You are a jewel on your campus. Let's have them value you as they would value a diamond.
Audrey, I have a question that's coming in from the chat, and thinking about sort of the value, being that gem What are the examples that you're seeing of universities that are being successful during this time and that will succeed? In the Northeast where I am, we've seen small liberal arts colleges face enormous challenges. Some have closed, but what does success look like?
Ooh. I'm taking this deep breath like this for several reasons. So one of them is I don't want to be, someone from the Chronicle said that we're going to make it. Like, that's a real thing for me as a journalist, right? And I don't have data in front of me that I can point to say that these data points suggest that, you know, this thing might happen. So I'll say something broad, and trust me, I'm not trying to not answer the question, but again, the reservations that I have, I've just laid out. I think the broad thing, and this goes back to what Steven said, that the people who are going to be successful in this are the ones who really put the students at the center and make them feel like there's a reason that I'm here at this college, and the way the courses are delivered, if they're going to have to be delivered online, it's going to have to be top-notch online delivery of courses. Like Steven said, people are very much, I don't want to pay all this money for this thing that's not anywhere near what I thought I would be getting if you're a new student, or what I used to get if you're a returning student. And so success is, I think, is going to be around the student and delivering the best to the student in a way that really just makes you shine above and beyond other people in the field, in the sector.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'll add one other thing, though, that I think successful institutions are going to be incredibly entrepreneurial. And they're going to be willing to try things, realizing that half of them are going to fail. They're going to go after the early college dual degree market. They're going to go after transfer students. They're going to go after adult learners. They're going to go after reskilling. They're going to offer these skills workshops that Audrey spoke about. Mm-hmm. And they're going to do all kinds of things to connect to their community. It's not going to be easy. And it's going to especially be difficult when everybody's a bit depressed and overworked. But not everybody's going to make it. And if you want your institution to make it, it's going to be a team effort. And it means being creative and being willing to think outside traditional boxes.
When do you think we'll see some of those, new business models, that stick? I know that sort of in higher education, there's kind of there's not a lot that's new. I think people look to others, what they're doing, copying. So when do you think, Steven, that we might see some of those, dominant models emerge?
What I would recommend, first of all, I'd recommend 4+1 programs. That is an undergraduate degree plus something, whatever it is. And hopefully it could be done in 4 years as opposed to 5 years. But I think having a real takeaway after getting an undergraduate degree could be really meaningful. And think, like a museum certificate might be one of those things that could be offered. Another thing that makes a lot of sense are very short skills workshops or boot camps where people can pick up a kind of skill that's meaningful and that they can put on their transcript, hopefully. So think if there are skills that your museum could offer that's only 1 day or 1 weekend, or maybe it's a week long, and that would be meaningful. There's areas I think where you can be entrepreneurial, bring in speakers and make people pay to see them. I think there are exciting opportunities right now, but you've got to be imaginative, and you've got to take the initiative.
Mhm.
Steven, we have a question from an anonymous attendee who asks about interoperability, which is a term frequently used in this person's university, in which departments are identified that can blend together to reduce cost and minimize redundancy in expense. Are you familiar with other universities that are doing this?
Well, I'm just as aware of places that are cutting back on the humanities in ways that are literally shocking, eliminating history departments or English departments and the like. I mean, clearly there's going to be a lot of that going on, especially at smaller institutions, rural institutions, and regional institutions. And this is very scary, and it's undercutting the very thing that makes a college education valuable. But imagine some other approaches. The most popular course at Yale, at least until recently, was a course on happiness. And imagine connecting an art museum with a psychology program. Psychology programs are really popular, right? At most institutions, it's the most popular major, the second most popular major. There are interesting ways where you could link up, I think. You don't have to just link up with art history or history department. There are other partnerships that might make sense right now and that would show your value. Interoperability, if it simply means cutting back, is scary and frightening. But imagine different kinds of synergy that you might be able to create.
Thank you.
Let me add one thing. The lesson from the experience years ago at Brandeis, where they were trying to sell parts of their collection, that is embedded in senior administrators' minds.
Right.
There are traumas that do not go away. You do not want to be covered in the Chronicle of Higher Education for weeks on end as the institution that closed down its museum. Because as much as they might want to do that or think that maybe there's some cost savings there, the publicity cost, of course, is catastrophic. I don't think Brandeis ever really wholly recovered from that act, that threat. Donors hate it. The press hates it. Opinion makers hate it. But it makes it all the more important to show your value.
Thank you. You know, we have another question coming from Lindell. Steven, she says, might be for an offline conversation, but we'll go ahead and pose it. That she totally agrees with you about museum staff teaching, but there are, as you know, probably many university bureaucracies to get around, not the least of which is faculty jealousy about who teaches what. And she says, our staff at the museum is classified as professional academic, and many have a PhD, but we as a museum can't offer 4-credit classes because we're not classified as part of the credit offering department.
You
And
know, I don't know what to say exactly except this. At Columbia, you know, which is pretty high up in the academic hierarchy, they love to have the professional staff teach. The professional staff publish books and they're professionally visible, and they take it for granted that those people are just as qualified to teach as anybody else around the institution. So you have an irony at the most prestigious institutions, I use that in quotation marks, they really don't have any self-esteem issues about this. There's no fear that somehow a job is going to be eliminated if you let somebody teach. It's at institutions that have more I think, issues with, I hate to use the word self-esteem, but I guess that's the right one, that are more hesitant to do that. You know, the professionals at the University of Texas at Austin are often our own PhD students. We think the world of them. Why wouldn't we want them to contribute in any way that they could? They only augment our efforts. Maybe that's an argument that will play better during this period.
I think that's part of what Lindell is asking is this a moment where that argument can be brought forward much more successfully than in past years?
Well, let me add one other thing to that. There are what we call commodity courses, which regular tenured faculty hate to teach, and often hire adjuncts to do that, of varying quality. And then there's highly specialized courses which a place would offer if it only had the people to do it. And those are the two areas where I think the door might be open, potentially. Hopefully broader than that, but certainly in those two areas.
I sort of feel like we do have like the people on this call, like we sort of do have an opportunity in that we could influence somebody who writes for the Chronicle of Higher Education, perhaps do a story on the need and value of staff teaching. So we'll keep it between us, but I think it's a good story.
Well, that is a pitch, Christina. All right.
I definitely think so. I definitely think so. Well,
but I have been surprised that at, you know, quote unquote elite institutions, that is very common.
Yeah.
And they just don't view it as an issue. And they also don't expect you to do it for free. I mean, years ago when I was at Columbia, people were, and I'm sure it's gone up since, it was $10,000 a course on top of your salary. So it was not exploitation.
Yeah, that's not the case at a lot of places.
No, I understand that. But
I would say, yeah, probably that there are a number of people who are tuning in today who are from smaller private liberal arts colleges where, you know, faculty are there because they are 100% into teaching. I mean, they do have research agendas, but, you know, so teaching then becomes a sort of differently valued, right?
We need more practitioners in our classrooms. People who actually have real world skills, real world experience, and can help open up career options to our students. You know, most faculty are actually not that well equipped to open windows into careers because they know one career. And we need to know what are the actual skills that people need and what are the job possibilities once you acquire them. At UT Austin, psychology is the largest major, and 4% of the students in psychology will ever go into a field that actually involves psychology. 4% of all the majors. And once the department realized that, they understood that the curriculum needed to change. The students go into research or they go into HR or other things, and they weren't preparing students at all for that. And so they changed.
That kind of change also needs to happen on the graduate level. I've written tons and tons and tons, no data today, but about that and how people with PhDs in various fields have no interest whatsoever in being an academe. And like Steven said, they don't have a person in-house that they can turn to show them how can they use the degree that they have to do something else. And so I'm now wondering, is this going to be the moment when there are institutions that are taking that seriously? So I don't want to say that people are not. I've gotten emails about many more workshops and the like about how to use your degree in any capacity. So I don't want to say that's not happening, but I feel like now is a moment where if it doesn't happen in a big, big way now, I don't know what it will actually take, because the job market inside and outside of higher ed is going to be different for years to come.
Yeah.
And something has to happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Audrey and Steven, for pointing that out and getting us to think about the future and how we might help undergraduate and graduate students. In terms of another opportunity, I know our time is coming to a close. And before we go, I do want to thank both of you and for the people who have been on the call. But the last opportunity that kind of you brought up that I want people to think of as we get ready for our conference and as we think about the students and our coworkers is the fact that you mentioned, Audrey, 70% of our faculty are feeling stressed. We're seeing higher levels of mental health issues on our campuses. Our conference next summer deals with wellness and equity. And I think these are going to be big topics for us to explore together. So kind of thank you for getting us to think about that as we head into the winter.
And this is a nice opportunity to mention that there is a third installment in this Kress supported series. In December, we will be hosting Caroline Randall Williams, who is a writer in residence at the medical school at Vanderbilt University. And you may recognize her name from some very powerful New York Times op-eds, some of her other writing, and her excerpts on MSNBC and other platforms. So we're looking forward to the ways that she will address some of these issues as well, of wellness and equity.
So thank you all for joining us. I don't want to put Steven and Audrey on the spot, but I really feel like I want to check in with you both in 6 months and see where we are and invite you back and kind of do like, you know, a part 2. So maybe I'll, you know, you'll be hearing from me again, but thank you both for this very informative and insightful presentation. And thanks to all of you who joined us today. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
There will be better days ahead.
There will be. There will be.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.